where the market is going, whether people like it or don't, is a deeper dive into describing the property that's being appraised, which is one, but only a small portion of the total number of things that's done in the appraisal process and in an appraisal report.
Or that gap is being bridged here by artificial intelligence. Certainly that is an easy one. You've got structured code. You won't need to know coding at all. I built a Python script, very simple for sure, but I built a Python script not knowing anything about it in 45 minutes.
Episode 33 of Market Moves with Mark and Jeff. Switching things up just a little bit as I had threatened to do, kicking off the podcast here. Mark, great to be with you. There's no shortage of things to discuss and analyze going on out there in the market. So good to be with you again.
Yeah, Jeff, what a year so far. Just to be doing a podcast covering real estate news and developments. My gosh, it has been nonstop. On some level, I feel like covering these things can get a little bit dull because it's wild movement, but in the same general hemisphere, I guess. And so it's a lot of the same, but wild swings in where things will go. Yeah, I thought I was going to tell you that I had gone fishing and retired from this podcast. I think the president, for some unknown, ridiculous reason, talked about the U.S. crypto reserve, and I happen to own some ridiculous coins from 3 years ago that were among the ones that the U.S. was going to build. So I thought I was going to be rich here. I guess I'm not. I don't really know. What a ridiculous thing it seems to be spending the president's time on and losing credibility one way or another. But not something necessarily for us to be talking about here. But certainly a sign of the wild times.
Boy, it's so interesting. I mean, there's no shortage of headlines and just weird things going on. And, crypto has been such a fascinating thing to watch. Definitely a lot of up and down. I mean, I remember when Bitcoin hitting $60,000 was a big deal, and it's since crossed the $100,000 threshold. It's recently retreated, and now it's gaining steam again. It's hard to know what to expect, of this long term, but just one of many interesting topics that is hitting like a presidential radar that you just, maybe didn't think would have been the case in the past, but a lot to keep up with. And if you do strike it big, I may be for hire if you need somebody to come and clean the fishing boat or something for you.
That sounds like plan. Yeah, that sounds like plan. It does seem, Jeff, like that crypto related to blockchain is something that will make its way into a real estate purpose. I know there are a few out there. Rex, I think, was one that I had seen some time ago. I haven't heard a lot about it recently, but it does seem like a reasonable play there, but too far down on the horizon for you and I to be talking about. So we can get to mortgage rates and government expense reduction and mortgage applications and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, I guess a little bit more in our wheelhouse at least. And, on that topic, as you bring it up, Mark, we had shared, or I saw a headline around, I think it was a CNBC article talking about a 20% increase in mortgage applications last week on a week over week basis, attributed specifically to a modest but meaningful drop in the mortgage rate over that period of time. I was tempted to be exuberant about that until it was pointed out that 20% of a historical low number is probably still not that big of a number when it's all said and done. But it's the thing that's fascinating to me is how sensitive the market seems to be to even just a modest, a 0.25% interest rate change in the improved direction, at least. So interesting to see that play out in the course of just a week.
Yeah, Jeff, I was noting in an article, I think it was on CNBC, that mortgage applications were up 20%. I think it was week over week, 9% purchase application increase, and a 2% increase from last year. So not a very big increase from last year. I think all of this is That's a big jump, and I am not looking a gift horse in the mouth. I'm very thankful for those increases. And what I think this really speaks to more than anything is something that's been hard for me to quantify over the last 4 months is how dead it has been in the mortgage application space in October, November, December, and beginning of January. And so big increases to return to normal at least give us real estate professionals a fighting chance. So I'm really happy to see it. And rates have gone from 7.2 to 6.7. And I was telling our company on a national call we had this week that we've been waiting for 2 years with bated breath for the interest rates to drop, and they have, and it doesn't matter anymore. And that's kind of how I feel. I mean, I think the frozenness in the real estate space, I think we are unfreezing a tick, which is great. I'm not really sure that it's interest rate driven right now. So take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, I do think that, we're seeing some signs of at least hopefully returning to normal. If we can get and maintain interest rates in that 6 to 7 range would make a huge difference. I was talking with my brother who sells real estate recently, and he was just reminiscing of as rates last year had gotten down into the low sixes. He was working with with builders that could buy down the rate further. You and I talked about that a little bit on a previous episode of the amount of dollars that it takes to buy down a rate is much less than an overall reduction in the price that that corresponds to the same impact for a borrower's mortgage. And he was saying, man, when they could buy down into the fives, it was the floodgates were wide open. We're far from that in the moment, it feels, but anything moving in that direction really, I think, can and will unfreeze a little bit of the housing market. I just in an article or an interview that you shared with Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, is that
Yep.
where he's at? He used that phrase or that terminology of kind of unfreezing of the housing segment, which he was commenting about expecting to be happening in the coming weeks. Now, stay tuned to see whether that happens or not. But an interesting perspective that he had, and I think that speaks to the desire that he and many throughout the administration have of improving interest rate environment, at least in the mortgage space.
Certainly seems to be a focus of this administration. And I think it certainly speaks to the souls of you and I and many of our listeners. I mean, this has been a depression level metric, I think, for us over the last 2 years. And I don't know, it's all really, really interesting to watch one way or another. So we had Mark Calabria on several episodes ago who was sharing, hey, look, I think that once rates start going down, that's sort of a self-fulfilling deal and snowballs, and they start going down heavy. There's room to do that, and that's certainly how I feel one way or another. The administration is talking about a main focus removing or lowering those interest rates one way or another, and we have watched the growing spread between the 10-year Treasury and the 30-year mortgage rate. It's been 280 or even as close to 300 points separating those two over the last 18 months, where historically I think we're in the 160 basis point spread. So it's a full 1.25% above where it normally is. And why has it grown that much? Well, a lot of folks talk about the increasing cost of increased regulation or just what it takes to get a loan done. And I've been a little struck, and admittedly, I'm not intimately familiar with the full roles of FHFA and what they play. I'm learning a lot now because of this podcast and just this interest rate cycle we live in, and the CFPB. But I've been kind of surprised by our appraiser colleagues that are typically very anti-establishment of anything, very frustrated with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHFA, and so on, have taken the CFPB sunsetting or putting on ice, whatever may happen here, as a real negative to the marketplace. And it just struck me enough to do a little bit of research and wonder why they can have those two positions. And it's I get it. I mean, there are reductions of poor borrowers borrowing money. I think is the easy way, but there is a lot of required regulatory requirement on banks. It could be cited as a reason why a lot of the small banks have consolidated into the few large major lenders that are out there, because it's too damned expensive to do a loan. And if you're small and can't afford all of that infrastructure in place to get these loans done, then you can't do that. And so at least discussion of sunsetting of CFPB or scaling it back quite a bit is definitely a major piece of that deregulation element introduction that can be that kind of cycle that feeds on itself to get rates lower and reduce that spread that's been here over the last 18 to 24 months.
Well, and that's the thing that's interesting to me, Mark, is will that deregulation effort start to lower that spread like you're talking about? Does it have a material and meaningful impact in the mortgage rates that people can get? And you and I were talking a little bit about this before, but it's just there's a right balance to strike, I think, between an appropriate amount of oversight and governance and an appropriate amount of letting the markets, do what they can and should do, on their own. And it seems like, if this analysis is correct, that the pendulum has probably swung too far towards the side of regulation that's driving up costs at a level and in a way that is not helpful, by and large, for the market. I'm really interested to see what that net impact is, and if it results in a material swing back in mortgage rates. I think everybody would welcome that. I've seen, as you would suggest, the arguments for and against kind of the work and the role that the CFPB fills and has played, since its inception coming out of the great financial crisis. But it does seem like, if it's really, the cause of the regulatory burden being too high, then pulling some of that back, maybe is probably a net benefit when it's all.
Yeah, this particular slowdown for real estate, all that rely on real estate transactions for a living, the reason for this level of stillness, which is still hard to put into words, 40-year stillness and 40-year level. We haven't seen it in 40 years. And we had population that was 60% of what it is now. I mean, that is enormous drop. And I think these kinds of reasons are one of a dozen or 24 reasons that add to the slowness. We don't see foreclosures anymore. We've got forbearances out there. Regulatory increased costs. You've got the consolidation of the small lenders that people used to do work with, and all of that. So this is all adding to what has been a really, really difficult time. And even modest removals or reductions of some of those several dozen factors that are creating the freeze is palpable. I mean, you can see some of that unfreezing, and I think that's what you and I have been talking about over the last several episodes, is that we see a little bit of that unfreezing right now, and that's enough to just to not be knocking at death's door.
It's a door that I think many in the real estate space have become familiar with, and I'm just anxious to move away from that. And I think at least a data point that we are talking about here is minor changes in that rate really is having a material impact on the amount of mortgage applications, as we led this segment out talking about. And so, if it continues, I think we may see a little bit more of a return to normal in 2025, but boy, there's no shortage of potential factors that could impact that, before it's all said and done.
Well, one interview that I saw over the last 7 days or so that made its rounds along the internet and I thought was useful for our listeners, and we'll include a link in the show notes, was I think it was Wall Street Week Bloomberg interview with Scott Bessent, U.S. Treasury Secretary that you discussed earlier. And it's a 17-minute interview. the first 10 minutes are kind of geopolitical, Ukraine and tariffs and all sorts of stuff that aren't appropriate for this show or relevant at least. But starting at about the 10-minute mark, just talking about overall economic policy, something we're spending a lot of time talking about here. And I think the reading between the lines, or maybe not even needing to read between the lines. Look, his statement is, this economy has been propped up by government spending, and as we reduce government spending, there is going to be a transition to the private sector, and that it may not be a smooth transaction or transition, but it's going to be happening nonetheless. And I think these are the things you and I have been talking about the last 12 plus months. Is that, boy, how on earth our job reports keep being so overwhelmingly positive beyond expectations? And we commented on a heavy dose of part-time jobs. Sometimes it's a second part-time job, a heavy dose of government employment that isn't widely filtered out or separated or even notated in those jobs reports. And this just resonates with my lived experience. And so I think we've got a lot of major change happening for the real estate professional. I'm not commenting on whether I'm proud of this fact or not, but bad news is good news for the frozen real estate market. And I do think that we are getting and pushing into some bad news, which will be painful for the U.S. economy for sure, but should mean the unfreezing of the real estate market on some level. And Jeff, the last thing I'll say on that is that it appears that the government is starting to begin some level of quantitative easing as opposed to the quantitative tightening that they've been on for the last little bit. This is essentially pumping money into the system, whether it is buying mortgage-backed securities, bonds, or just printing money altogether. And I think they're trying to do that to try and ease this transition and not create at least as little pain as possible in the marketplace.
Yeah, one of the things that stood out to me from his interview that you referenced there, Mark, was a willingness to deal with some short-term pain in making this transition. And I think I agree with your assessment that the quantitative easing is designed to help smooth that pain, to the extent possible. But Bessent and the administration do seem to be pretty focused on getting the 10-year Treasury, which is tied to the mortgage interest rates, down and at a level that will spur more economic activity, kind of across the board. And so, that's their goal. That's their stated objective. We'll see if that's how it plays out. But interesting, and I think a reason for hope for what may be to come this year as a result of the effort and kind of a change in what the prior administration was focused on.
So Jeff, these are all the macro level variables and factors that are coming into play. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about what that is doing to the inventory landscape and the sales landscape as it relates to housing?
Yeah, you bet. And we had touched on this a little bit in the past, so I maybe won't go super deep into it. But there's another article today or this week that came out since we last recorded, showing a drop in pending home sales in markets like Florida and Texas, resulting in a spike in the standing inventories in some of those southern states. And you and I had pulled up previously and talked a little bit about some of the net migration into some of the Northeast markets and sections of the country that are have many more pending home sales. In fact, one analysis that I saw compared the entire state of Connecticut and its available inventory as being less than just the standing inventory in Punta Gorda, Florida, which is just one small subset of the Florida real estate market. There were more homes available for purchase in Punta Gorda that has a population of 200 odd thousand people compared to the same number there were fewer homes in Connecticut that has a population of 3 million, if I have my numbers correct. Just stark contrast to see that not every market around the country is responding at a similar and equal way to the economic realities that are out there right now. And as you start to draw these comparisons, the difference can be really stark from one market to the next.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, it definitely, real estate is local, and for sure. So every market is different. As we look nationally, I think we've got roughly February in national inventory of 850 some odd thousand homes. And boy, what I think it was just before COVID, we might have been around 1.1 million, somewhere in that neighborhood. So we're still, some 30-40% below where we were before COVID. COVID got down to something like 300,000 national listings, just an atrociously low level and scary low level, frankly. And I remember when the Fed was starting out with their interest rate rise, saying, "Hey, this is one of the metrics we're trying to achieve," and it was something like 1.4, 1.5 million homes, active inventory in the marketplace, and so we're moving up. This is generally what I think is good for the country, to have enough homes for sale on the marketplace. But that transition, again, there's that word, is going to be ugly, and in certain markets we're seeing that it is.
Yeah, that's right. Trump, even prior to being elected, had stated an objective of bringing on 4 million new housing units or affordable housing units, 3 or 4 million. Um,
Yep.
in a 4-year period of time, and that doesn't speak to all inventory levels, but to me it'll be interesting to see how that objective plays out. There are some conflicting actions being taken. Tariffs have been a topic of the day, and there is going to be a direct impact on building material costs in particular, and maybe exacerbated by poor timing with fires that have just taken, that have ceased now, but have taken place. And now the rebuilding process starts back in or out in the Los Angeles market area. And so we've just got multiple factors going on. And I think everybody is on board with the objective of increasing affordable housing, but how you do it is challenging if you're at the same time, potentially driving up, building material costs to try to facilitate that new inventory coming online.
Well, Jeff, it's been hard to get these recordings done actually the last several weeks, because I have had an opportunity to travel around a little bit. Washington D.C., Chicago, New York. At first, just kind of personal observations. As I traveled over the last several years, like, how on earth is it this busy in every hotel? Hotels are booked and you can't get a room, or I'm paying twice as much as I thought I would, or the airports are packed, the parking lots are full, and all of that. And just in the last 3 weeks of travel, definitely notice a little bit lighter activity in each of these places, and maybe a little bit of observation of some slowdown that's happening one way or another. But the travel's been interesting, because it's spending some time with appraisal leaders, real estate leaders around the country. A lot of change happening, a lot of discussion about artificial intelligence and where to go. I think my overall takeaway is that everybody's still trying to figure out a good use for this stuff, and those that are further down the path might have more like stakeholders to answer to and show progress and attention to these sorts of things. I don't get demos necessarily, so maybe somebody would blow my socks off if I saw demos, but I think people are reaching and trying to find solutions there. Spent some time at the Appraisal Modernization Summit that FHFA held in DC. That was my first time. I think the second one they've held, the first time I've attended, and really a lot of the same information communicated, which is not a bad thing. I think it is communicating thoroughly to the users and the people in charge of what ultimately is the infrastructure of lending and appraisal. Making sure that everybody is ready for these new forms coming, that everybody understands the hybrid appraisal process, the property data collection process, in all of that. So what I think it is November 6th, November 2nd, something like that, is the beginning of implementation of this, not in whole, but in part. So that stuff is coming. I said this somewhere on the interwebs that I'm change is change. It's not good or bad. We just got to be ready for it when it comes. Certainly as appraisers. And there's a lot to learn with the coming changes, and then how to provide value in that marketplace. I think there's even something to take from why some of this change is in place. There are probably valid. I can't attest to them, but what seem like valid complaints about the quality of inspection data or reporting on the subject that appraisers are giving back to the GSEs, and they have created a lot more fields to report back on the subject property in the new forms, and also have instituted this property data collection system and process that adds more structure to that.
Yeah, you bet. It's going to be an interesting transition, going into this new kind of way of collecting information about properties that appraisers are appraising. I was just recently invited by a realtor, I think out of Maryland, to sit down and just kind of answer some questions. She's doing this, multi-part interview series with different parties to a real estate transaction, trying to help, I think, her clients understand what happens in the process. How does it happen? Why does it happen? So, she'd connected with me through a Facebook group, and one of the questions was good, but said, so walk us through the appraisal process, and it's like, well, I mean, it takes weeks and weeks of like education, going very deeply into different aspects of that. But I think what you're talking about here, Mark, and where the market is going, whether people like it or don't, is a deeper dive into describing the property that's being appraised, which is one, but only a small portion of the total number of things that's done in the appraisal process and in an appraisal report. But there is a desire to, as accurately and thoroughly as possible, define and describe what's going on in a property. And right now, just as an example, you describe the condition of a property with a single rating applied to the entire property itself, regardless of whether the outside has been remodeled or updated, or the inside has been, or one bathroom was updated but the other one wasn't, or there's just so many unique opportunities, or so many differences in how a property can be updated over time. And then the condition of a property is just one of many factors that we think about. And so I think part of this effort is to give a better and more granular view into what's actually been done to a property, and what is that, ultimately that impact on its value in the market. Now, I do wonder if this enhanced level of reporting on properties is going to add to confusion by borrowers and real estate agents and other users of appraisal reports. I know that part of what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have done is kind of beta tested potential outputs in the report, and they've stated publicly that they think that the new reporting format is going to be more user friendly and easier to read. We'll see if that happens. It's not out there in the the actual market in the moment, but I do think that with appraisers trying to get more granular in what they describe in the property, maybe that helps and is a net positive for anybody reading an appraisal report. Maybe it adds to the confusion that already exists out there. Do you have a sense of where you think that'll go?
We had an episode, Jeff, where I mean, I'm sure no one else remembers it, but I remember being somewhat critical of the GSE's communication process in some of these things that are being rolled out, whether it is ANSI or this floor plan requirement on the desktop assignments and hybrid and whatnot. My experience has been it's really a mess on the in the weeds, boots on the ground, trying to complete these sort of things. The nobody's producing these floor plans ahead of an appraisal, but a desktop is ordered, and my client says, get the desktop done. Don't go out to the property and go do an inspection. I'm asking you to do a desktop, but you can't do that unless a floor plan exists. Well, the floor plan doesn't ever exist. So what do you do? And you're just kind of left sitting there, unsure how to not lose a client and how to satisfy the request. And so I am I'm at least pleased to see what I kind of see as redundant communication on some of these new initiatives. Now it's to the stakeholders, and even at the valuation summit or modernization summit, the you know the marketplace outside of the stakeholders certainly still needs education. What is a property data collector? There's an uneasiness about that process, and there probably should be an uneasiness with that process. It isn't an appraiser. They haven't gone through all the hoops that a trainee or an appraiser has to go through in the home, and people are generally aware of that and have some concern. Uh, Even if it's a cheaper cost or maybe even a faster product, which often it's not. So, I think there's real risk, certainly in the beginning, for some miscommunication, and then of course the fields generally in the report will add to that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it will be rolled out, and we will get some firsthand feedback. It does create some confusion. Um, it's not been widely adopted, but there are these hybrid appraisals that can be done, and I've seen situations where, and it's reasonable that the agent or the homeowner, whoever's meeting an appraiser at a property, if they are, assumes that whoever's there collecting information for the appraisal is the appraiser, and though it's only on kind of one-off instances that I hear about, there's definitely confusion, and sometimes people assuming that the person there collecting information is the one actually doing the appraisal and determining the value, and that hasn't always been the case. And with this modernization effort, that there's a real likelihood that it will be even less frequent that whoever meets the data collector at the home isn't ever actually meeting or interacting with the appraiser. And I've seen arguments for that being good or bad, but I think it is a reality one way or the other as far as this modernization impact.
For the love of God, Jeff, can we please somehow find a way to not have to refer to the person learning appraisal going into the property to be called a trainee? I can't imagine a worse title for them, and anything is better than that. And I property data collector is a better name than trainee. They aren't going through the hoops that you'd like to see, but to become that. But man, we are setting new people trying to learn behind. It just screams, I don't know what I'm doing, which is most of the time not the case.
Yeah, not when they've had good training, but that's exactly right. And I've seen many, concerned about that. In fact, some states, not many, but some states use different, terminology for that. Nevada refers to them as an intern, different than a trainee. Most have adopted the language that's out there, but yeah, I would be on board with a rebrand there, because it's even as a trainee, quote unquote, you still have taken appraisal education. You've still been background checked. You've jumped through a number of hoops, and you're working closely with an appraiser. But it sure gives the impression that I'm an appraiser baby in training, and I don't know anything yet. And those that take the training seriously, I mean that's not usually the case by the time they're out there in the field looking at properties.
I think the homeowner may feel like a motivation to haze this person coming in because they're so new, and the name just doesn't set up well. So yeah, I guess that's a soapbox. But we have even sort of renamed that person as a position in our company just to try and contend with that issue one way or another.
Yeah, try to bring a little bit of dignity to it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jeff, I definitely wanted to comment on, and maybe this is prediction time. We nailed the presidential race. Kudos to us. But we are recording this a day before Senate confirmation hearings with the FHFA director nominee, Bill Pulte. The first Senate hearing was held a week or so ago. Don't know if you happened to catch that. What were your thoughts? And do you want to squeeze in a prediction? Does he get confirmed or not?
Well, I probably should set the record straight. I think when you and I were invited to predict the outcome of the presidential election, it was not a real enthusiastic prediction one way or the other, meaning we weren't terribly confident as to what in the world was going to happen. And I'm feeling a little bit that way here too with the potential confirmation of Bill Pulte. I think it probably ends up going through. I don't see an overwhelming level of support, outside of just kind of the down the party lines that you would expect, and there's not much room or margin for error in the moment. So my prediction is that he probably gets the nod and the nomination. I think it's going to be very tight if he does, and I wouldn't be wholly surprised, if it doesn't play out that way. But I would lean towards it going through.
Yeah, I was just looking at Polymarket, and for those that don't know, it's a pretty fun website that is it is adding betting odds to a lot of things that you would not expect betting odds to be placed on. And I did not see a confirmation yes or no for Bill Pulte, but it seemed like the hearing didn't do anything to sway anyone towards the nomination. I think he was probably, I think the general momentum would be just to approve whoever the president is trying to put forward for that. So I did, looked a little green. I think I saw Elizabeth Warren suggest that Pulte had deleted over 100,000 X posts or something. I don't know. I don't know what that means, but kind of interesting. But certainly he's got a ton of experience in the housing space. I don't think anybody would be put up for this nomination if they weren't into and for the exit of conservatorship with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Bill certainly espoused that position. So, what I would say is that my guess is, and this will have happened one way or another. So we'll have egg in our face or not, but I would guess that it would be a modest majority voting for the confirmation, and we'll see where we go.
Well, that's always the challenge with putting something out there in the prediction, and it's not that different from doing an appraisal. Sometimes we'll do pre-listing appraisals where somebody wants to know what the house is worth, and you always hold your breath a little bit. I did one a little while ago where kind of a tricky house in a tricky neighborhood, and it's like I mean this is as good as I think I can get, but I wouldn't be surprised if it sells for more or less or something different. And I think with a lot of these predictions, that's kind of how it feels. Like I'll put something out there, but whether it's right or wrong, I have no idea, and very well may look stupid down the road.
Shout out to our relocation appraisers that make a living out of doing that well and get judged on it. That it is a very cool niche within the appraisal business. Okay, great. Well, Jeff, I was kind of turning our attention a little bit to artificial intelligence. It's kind of a common theme, and maybe becomes more common of a theme in what we discuss here. We really haven't talked about, it hasn't been out for very long, but Grok 3, the XAI cluster and training and version has been released. Competitor of ChatGPT and Gemini and all these others that are out there. And you access this, I think through like grok.com or the app Grok, but also through the X app. I happen to be on that quite a bit and often, and so it's an easy access to me. And I have been wildly impressed with its utility on a number of instances. Jim Amron inspired me to at least think that it could help me write Python scripts and perform some tasks. And darn if it didn't lead me in about a 45-minute exercise. Never downloaded Python before. Really didn't even understand the mechanics of it. I understood what it could do, but didn't know how it did it. Walked me through a pretty cool program that I put together using my MLS data. And that was a lot of fun. But even simple questions like, if someone isn't in favor of the CFPB, why would they be not in favor? And just give you a great paper on that. So a ton of use. I have happened to find it to be a little bit more on target with what either I was looking for in my question, or what I should have asked but didn't.
Well, it's sure fun to see and hear that. And in the episodes that we've done with Amron, where we just pull it up and start asking questions, testing and trying things, it really whets the appetite. I think, what I'm hearing you say, Mark, and I think is critical to adoption of artificial intelligence is getting your hands on it and having the discipline or kind of forcing yourself to use it in ways that may not be your instinctive, first approach to answering a question, to finding a piece of information. It's far from perfect, but I think it's going to be the way that things get done going forward. We commented, I think, previously, but I heard Jeff Bezos talking about or likening artificial intelligence to electricity and what the impact that electricity had on modern society. He said, I don't think the right way to think about artificial intelligence is another mobile wave or another internet wave, but it's more like electricity in that it's going to be in and enable everything that we do. I don't think that happens overnight, but it's certainly evolving quickly. And so the more that we have our hands on it, are learning what it does well, what it doesn't do well, I kind of take as a positive the fact that it doesn't do everything well, that you still have to apply some level of judgment and screening to its outputs. It hasn't totally replaced us yet, as far as being an intelligent source that's better than us. It does still hallucinate. In fact, I just was listening to a Wall Street Journal article this morning talking about hallucinations and kind of how prevalent they are and how impactful it is when it will tell you a bold-faced lie with tons of confidence, that it's right, even when it's not. And I think where appraisers and even real estate agents and other real estate professionals worry about, hey, am I going to be replaced in some way? There's still the test of reasonableness. There's still the human judgment aspect that it seems far from solving. Maybe it's not that far, but it doesn't seem to be on the short-term horizon as far as I'm concerned there, Mark.
Yeah, I think we've got the benefit of operating within a highly regulated space, and whether it's healthcare or real estate or medicine, all of these things are really highly regulated for pretty good reason, and those hallucinations, are just unacceptable ever, really. And so I think we have some protection there. That's good, but man, what a where artificial intelligence in early adoption works. We're hearing stories. I'm sure you've listened to our favorite All In podcast and in this most recent episode talking about, within 3 months spinning up a $5 million monthly run rate. And there's stories like this all over with just a dozen people or so, in spinning up companies and use cases really, really quickly. That isn't our space, but it is happening in and around us. And I do wonder if you might have a company that is replacing, I don't know, let's just say Salesforce or some tech that's out there, some SaaS business, and so somebody spins something up really quick that can do basically the same thing for a 20th of the cost. Well, how quickly before someone comes behind that group and does something for 1/20th of that cost, and then the group that ran up to 5 million monthly run rate in 90 days, in 2 weeks is out of business because something more competitive came up. It feels like that sort of thing might be the norm here for a while for some of this low-hanging fruit business.
That could be the manifestation of enhanced productivity and kind of this deflationary impact that artificial intelligence, has the potential of producing or providing for people in the marketplace. I'm watching it very, with a lot of interest and curiosity. I know you are as well. It will be interesting to see what the impact is in the long term. A lot of the people that I hear talk about it, and this makes sense to me, that if you can get a whole lot more compute and programming and just coding through the efficiencies that artificial intelligence brings, there's an appetite, there's the demand and desire for a whole lot more compute and coding. I think you and I could probably sit down and brainstorm on a whole bunch of programming things we would love to have within this business and personal lives and everywhere else, that because we're not coders or programmers ourselves, you're just resource constrained because good coding engineers and coders are expensive. Artificial intelligence, I think, has a good likelihood of unlocking a whole lot of software and options and opportunities that have just been not available to us because of the resources that the expense of bringing that stuff to market or into a use case within your own business. So interesting to see.
Jeff, that brings me to something I've been thinking a lot about. This closing the gap. That the multiples of a tech business or the career of a coder that has you can learn on your own. You can go to school to learn, but it's probably several years of training to be able to do that sort of stuff. So it's inaccessible to someone that hasn't spent all that time to get into it, and maybe doesn't have the availability or commitment level to get there. But that bridge that gap is being bridged here by artificial intelligence. Certainly, that is an easy one. You've got structured code. You won't need to know coding at all. I built a Python script, very simple for sure, but I built a Python script not knowing anything about it in 45 minutes, and now I know a little bit more. And that's coding. I mean, there's ways that you don't even need to do that. People are building games, like video games, off of Grok right now. But the thing I've been thinking a lot about, I've got a 17-year-old daughter, I've got an 8-year-old son and a 6-year-old son, and I don't have a clue of how to guide them. I feel like I've got a little more time for my young boys, but my daughter, who's 17, she's interested in the medical field, but I really don't know how to advise her in what to do with these coming changes. And I heard Naval, I don't even know his last name or know how to pronounce him, but he's well known on the internet for being a pretty thoughtful guy. And I had heard him talking about parenting of his own kids, and he has them code an hour a day as is one of the many things. When I kind of come away from that smart guy, I kind of come away thinking, why are you doing that? Why is coding needed? Maybe he's got a better idea than I do. I don't know, but I think it's worth exploring how to best prepare the next generation. And I do think this dovetails into real estate because it provides maybe some insight. I kind of researching this and getting curious about it provides some usefulness in what the real estate professional might look like in the next several years.
Boy, we could probably riff on this for a long time. There are a lot of potential implications there, Mark. From the future of work to the future and need of housing spaces and styles, and you need more offices, like dedicated offices in your house than bedrooms at some point, given demographic directions and all of those sorts of things. But as it pertains to the future of work and preparing people, I heard that same interview that Naval had given, or at least that podcast that he had joined, and it's such an interesting question. I don't know. He's in Silicon Valley. He's kind of in the tech space, right? So I'm sure that coding is something that's already familiar to him, and would want to or see the value in that. I have heard others in the coding space, but even like in real estate, for example, if you don't know the fundamentals and the basics, it's hard to know when artificial intelligence is going wrong or when it's producing something that isn't right. And so I wonder if, how do you guide the 17-year-old? I've got a 19-year-old who's, trying to figure out, life and careers and that sort of thing as well. And I think it at some level comes down to becoming as familiar as you can with artificial intelligence and how it's going to apply in a chosen field or area or profession. I think it's going to, over time, dramatically change how we do what we do. I think there's still going to be a need for a lot of the professionals that are out there, but what their day-to-day looks like is going to be different from what ours does. But if I wind the clock back 10 or 20 years, I remember, just waiting for appraisal requests to show up on the fax machine, and there have been some evolutions. Now, artificial intelligence is probably a step change, beyond that, but things always evolve. And I think, embracing and understanding what it does now, what it doesn't do now, and where it may be heading is probably important career prep for anybody looking at either starting in the career space or rebranding or redesigning in the career space, because I think it's going to impact things now and even more dramatically in the future. It may be easier to guide your 17-year-old than your 8-year-old, depending on how drastically things change in the next decade.
Well, Jeff, I think if the listener can imagine my 17-year-old daughter receiving a tweet forward of mine that is covering the topic that agency is greater than intelligence. What on earth is her dad talking about, and why do I care about this sort of stuff? But Andre Karpathy is like a well-known AI guy, somebody that understands AI deeply. I think he was developing full self-driving at Tesla for a long time before he left. And he's just kind of on his own educating people about artificial intelligence. Really interesting to follow. But he explained that he has valued intelligence over all else for a really long time, and kind of understandable trying to hire people in artificial intelligence. Those seem to be where like you just have to be smart. You can't overcome having average intelligence. You gotta really be there. But this high agency thing is a term that in a concept that I've had a little bit of struggle. It's taken me some time to understand, and I don't fully understand it, but he describes it as personality trait that refers to an individual's capacity to take initiative, make decisions, and exert control over their actions and environment. It's about being proactive rather than reactive. Someone with high agency doesn't just let life happen to them, they shape it. And it's self-efficacy, determination, sense of ownership over one's path. And there's we can post, or we can include this link if we think it's a good idea in the show notes, or even talk about this a little bit more deeply. But right now, that's where I think I come out, is that, and I am really trying to help my daughter foster a curiosity about life. I'm not sure she's too curious about it right now, but not just to follow the beaten down path in front of her because it's obvious, but get curious about things and dive deep and be proactive and decisive. She's the opposite. She would describe herself as the opposite of decisive, an overthinker and that sort of thing. But sports is one thing that really can teach this. Being bold and making bad decisions, learning what happens from that, making good ones, and kind of leading in a direction. And I think, at least in this beginning, that's where I am right now, is that getting curious, being multifaceted in your curiosities, and learning to make decisions, be proactive and decisive, is a skill set that maybe is kind of rare, and maybe what sets people up best, down the road. I don't know.
Boy, it's a fascinating conversation and topic, Mark. I'm glad that that you're bringing it up. It's crazy to think that you've got a research assistant in your pocket. I mean, you talked about the Grok app, through X, right? I mean, you could sit there and have conversations day and night with that thing, and just exercise kind of that curiosity muscle of, I wonder how this works. I wonder why this is the way that it is. And I mean, it is a great reminder to me, to be doing more of that sort of thing. I think what can happen for, whether it's the new generation coming into the space or anybody, and looking at a change in career, or even just enhancing where they're at in a chosen career, there is so much available information that's at your fingertips. But why do we not access it? Because we're not exercising this agency that we have to be proactive and pursue things of curiosity just for its own sake. Not that that has to be a chosen career or whatever. So this may be a topic that we dive a little deeper into, but this concept of kind of taking control of one's destiny and exercising or using agency in a proactive and intentional way is a topic that's that to me also is pretty near and dear. It definitely resonates, and I think is something that you have to be intentional around, or you do just kind of, it's easy to fall into the path of least resistance, or the beaten down path, like you said, that so many others have traveled. The path less traveled is, I think, there's some compelling reasons to be engaged in pursuing that sort of thing. So love that you're bringing it up, for sure, because I think it's going to come down to a lot of decisions that people have to make, at all stages of careers, as to what the future looks like going forward for them.
It's been the fun thing, in our space, like in appraisal, just watching folks, really, I see a lot of young folks, whether they're getting in deep into data science or building some order management system that solves problems, or helping address these market adjustments. Real estate just if you got curiosity, it's easy to go deep into that. I was hearing someone describe to kind of someone contemplating coming in, they're into litigation and kind of being an expert witness in complex commercial property issues, and they just got really interested in being the one to research and understand those answers and argue for them one way or another. And, what, like teaching or whatever it is. But, those are kind of the high agency folks that are being self-determinate and curious and kind of going where their curiosities lead them.
You really benefit from being around good mentors along the way. Both my dad and his partner have been that, for me over the years. And I remember his partner talking about this concept specifically of curiosity and how important it is in, you know, his context was in the real estate appraisal profession, but he was really speaking in a broader context of, if you want to be good at anything, pursuing some natural level of curiosity that you have will lead you there, and developing, maybe a higher level of curiosity than what you might naturally have is an incredibly valuable perspective. It's almost a skill set, that you get. I remember hearing him talking about how important it is to be curious, with almost like a level of reverence or something. Like, it was just like, that really resonated. Like that's important. And I, at the time, even sensed to myself, like, I need to be more curious and just pursue things that say, I wonder about this or that, not stopping at that. Oh, I wonder about this, but I'm too busy and I'll come back to it later. And then I never do. I mean, that's easy to do, but with Grok or chat or anything else sitting in your pocket, I mean, there's really no good reason not to be pursuing curiosities, and they lead to fascinating destinations.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's those curiosities and determination, I think, has led us to our business venture, which is just, hey, I think we can. I think there's a better way to serve this large swath of appraisal orders that are out there that are demanding a lot faster product, a lot better communication, and that business problem to solve has been intriguing to you and I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Great use case and example there for sure. And there's just so many manifestations of of where that can lead to. And oftentimes it's not what you anticipate when you first start out, but the journey and pursuing those curiosities. And hey, I wonder what if, could we do this better, different, faster, more efficiently, more effectively? It really leads to some interesting places. And artificial intelligence is only going to facilitate, I think, that and accelerate it in many ways.
You bet. Well, Jeff, been a great discussion. Thank you for the time here, and look forward to many more.
Looking forward to it, Mark. It's been a bit of a technical struggle with a microphone today for me, but hopefully I'm coming through okay. I'm holding it. I've been reduced to not even using the stand anymore, but been a fun discussion. We'll look forward to picking up the next one.
You are the stand.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.